I'm really excited to welcome to Exploring the Vintage NFT Space podcast with Zero G, one of the most iconic Rare Pepe artists. Hiya.
Hi, hello.
Well, thanks for joining me today. Really excited to talk to you.
Likewise. Thank you.
Well, you've created one of the most iconic and recognizable Pepes. But before we talk about your Pepes, let's talk a little bit about your background, both as an artist and in crypto. Why don't we start with how you heard about crypto and how you decided to go ahead and take that leap?
Yeah, I think it was like around 2011-ish, like is when I first heard about Bitcoin. Um, I was actually looking at some forums for people who build their own PCs. It's mostly gamers and stuff who, wanted to add all the flashy lights and whatnot. And I saw some posts of people who had just way more GPUs than necessary. And I was kind of curious, like, what is this? And it turns out that, it was still the GPU mining days was still, it's still viable back then. So people were building mining rigs and posting pictures of that. And that's how I first learned of it. Thought it was interesting, and I spent some time on places like Bitcoin Talk and looked at different kind of ideas in the white paper, and it seemed super interesting. I don't think I really quite got it maybe on a cryptographic sense at that time yet, but it just seemed really fascinating, and I kind of really kept an eye on it for the next 2 years. And as I kept my eye on it and looked at different projects and stuff, around 2013 or so, I decided, I really just want to get involved. And the people that I saw posts from on Bitcoin Talk were just really people that I wouldn't have ever talked with through my regular like social or work life. So I kind of wanted to connect with those people a bit more, and so I started taking on projects for little Bitcoin things like Bitcoin websites or like UIs or logos, design work for products, that kind of stuff. And it kind of just sort of grew from there. And maybe about a year after that, I decided, okay, I'm going to do crypto stuff full time. So I quit my job and I decided, okay, I'm going to do just Bitcoin stuff from here on. I got super lucky and ended up being hired by a crypto startup shortly after. And since then, yeah, I've just been doing nothing but Bitcoin or crypto work.
Oh, that's awesome. You know, that's really fortuitous because I know early on it was such a nascent space that finding
Mm,
viable, being able to support yourself in the space is really hard.
yeah.
Well, so after you saw these mining rigs and you were kind of following that, but what kind of interested you about crypto when you were reading about it?
Yeah. I mean, I don't consider myself a very political person, or
Yeah.
nor am I like super, I don't know, into economics and stuff. So that part was not super interesting to me, to be honest. But more so, it was sort of just this sort of futuristic idea of how we can control money was maybe on a more creative side, very interesting. And it kind of felt like, I mean, having used Bitcoin for the first time, the feeling I felt after it was just like so uniquely. I mean, it felt like being a spy. It felt like being like, I don't know, like someone who was doing something new. Like it kind of had such a. It made me as a person using it feel like, I don't know, like discovering something. And so that sort of experience made me think, okay, how can I like make this more available to other people? And the greatest way to do that is to get people to use Bitcoin, or to focus on making interfaces that make Bitcoin easy, that kind of stuff. And that's kind of how I really sort of found my niche, I guess, in the Bitcoin space.
That's interesting because that was one of the first couple times I used Bitcoin. That was the one thing that helped, like, that made me a little bit skeptical, is that the interfaces so early on were so
Mm,
primitive, and
yeah.
I mean there are no safeguards either. So
Hmm.
that's what made me skeptical. So it's interesting you saw that as an opportunity.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I've been doing nothing but this kind of well, not entirely, but mostly sort of UI and usability work. And there's still a lot of, a long way to go, I think, especially in terms of like security. Since, as a user, if you're controlling all of your assets yourself through a non-custodial wallet, or through cold wallet and whatnot, it really is on you to do it properly. And so as people or creators of these services and products, it's really important for us to make sure that it's as hard as possible for people to mess it up.
Yeah, and do you normally recommend hardware wallets for people that and I know in my experience, I've onboarded people to crypto, and I don't even onboard them without walking
Mhm.
them through how to use a hardware wallet.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a little bit harder,
Mhm.
um, but at the same time, just having a physical thing that you can hold in your hand, or that where it is in your house, if it's in your, safe deposit box somewhere, the sort of sense of comfort in physical. So I think it's in some ways like a good crutch to have, and people feel safe using it just because of that like familiarity.
Mhm.
Um, but there are still, like separate different concerns entirely, as like, um, other sorts of devices, especially if it's like, the cold steel wallets, or those ones that are just like entirely manual, where you kind of just slide little letters in to, represent
Mhm.
your recovery phrase and whatnot. Like that's kind of a separate thing than, having like, let's say, a Trezor or a Ledger wallet. The sort of concerns between there and sort of survivability in different kind of environments and long term and all that stuff. It's all very different. So it's hard to really, pick one and say this is the best, because they all have their pros and cons.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even consider like you were saying the cold steel. I mean, that's more of what I consider like a backup mechanism. But
Mm-hmm.
I know I just bring it up because every time I think about it, and the reason I don't like onboard people without a hardware wallet is I can't trust. Like you can communicate people that that their PC can be compromised with a soft wallet, but a lot of people just aren't technically savvy enough to
Mm-hmm.
prevent their PC from potentially getting compromised. And
Yeah.
there's 0 days out there too that constantly come out. So anyway, that's one of the reasons I try to emphasize hardware wallets for at least for
Mm-hmm.
day-to-day
Mm-hmm.
usage.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, well, cool. Well, that's interesting that you've been able to make some real improvements in the space, like I said, which is obviously needed back in the day. I mean, it still is. I mean, it's still hard for new people coming in to
Mm-hmm.
wrap their head around it. But so, do you want to talk a little bit about your background as an artist and how how you got started in art and maybe some of your projects?
Yeah. So back in university, actually, I originally wanted to major in computer science, but I don't know, I just didn't have a lot of confidence in my math skills back then. So I thought, well, okay, screw the computer science degree. I'll just go ahead and do art, but I'll make digital media, or just programming a part of the art. And so that way I can get away with doing the same kind of, I don't know, some programming stuff, without the scrutiny of making sure that that I have good grades in calculus and whatnot. So that's how I kind of got into art. I was always interested in art to begin with, but yeah, as I went through university, I really focused on digital media, as well as art history. And as I was finishing my degree, I had the opportunity to work with sort of a research group, and through that research group, I was focusing on sort of that convergence, or like that intersection between technology and art and culture. And uh, I guess that space is kind of what primed me to getting into NFTs. I definitely have sort of this appreciation for things that are like absurd or chaotic. And NFTs are such a, I don't know, like a beautiful contrast to the Bitcoin space, I guess, because we consider Bitcoin as such a sort of like a hard sciencey utilitarian thing. that connects to, all these other sort of very dry topics like economics and whatnot, and politics. But the NFT side is just so, wild and goofy, and in the eyes of many people, it has such a like uselessness. But that uselessness is like where all of the fun comes from. And even if it doesn't have like a exact material or utilitarian value, it certainly gives, a lot of like thought-provoking ideas, and it sort of flies in the face of sort of like the very seriousness of Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's interesting that like one of the things that clicked for me last year is that um, over the years, I mean, you remember like early on there was this, like we were trying to get adoption for cryptocurrencies, and it like we seemed to have small wins, but we never really got mass adoption. And what clicked for me is that NFTs are really kind of like the gateway drug to get people to actually onboard and get a wallet and care enough to actually, to get involved in the ecosystem. That's one thing that really excites me about that.
Yeah, it definitely. I mean, it just if you hang out in like the Rare Pepe's Discord and stuff, like there's people are asking all the time, like, oh, how do I back up the keys, or like how does this recovery phrase work? And these are all kind of like the foundational elements to like also managing your own crypto, not just the NFTs as well. So I like that it's bringing in people and helping people to learn.
Yeah, I mean, so you obviously, you like you said, you have a formal education in digital media and art. I mean, it really shows in your Pepes. How did you find out about NFTs on Bitcoin? Because throughout the years, I didn't find out about Counterparty until way after the fact.
Yes, I think it was around 2014-ish. I decided at that time, like, I would do just Bitcoin work or crypto work from then on. And I had just moved to Tokyo, Japan, and I got connected with some people who were in the Bitcoin space pretty quickly. And I started to help out at the Bitcoin. We had like a weekly meetup in Tokyo. And so I was there and helping to organize it, and help get the newbies up to speed and all that stuff. And I think at one of those events, I think people were starting to talk about Counterparty a little bit, and it must have been 2015-ish or so at that time by then. But yeah, a friend of mine kind of introduced me to it, and we were kind of just looking at the different Rare Pepe stuff, and it seemed just so goofy and silly. But we thought, oh, this is interesting. We can actually make art and save it like on the blockchain in some form. So as soon as I heard about Rare Pepes and seeing the stuff that people were making, I thought, oh, I have to make my own. Like, there's no way I can let myself live without making one of my own. So I the next week, I think it was, on my lunch break at work, I just kind of opened Photoshop and kind of just started randomly putting some stuff together, and that's how HAIRPEPE was born.
So it was just a spontaneous.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I was always really fascinated with how that came about, because HAIRPEPE is, I've heard people like refer to it almost like the Mona Lisa of the Pepes, because it's such an intriguing. Every time you look at it, it makes you stop and really, at least for me, I always stop and have to stare at it for a little bit. It's such an arresting image.
Yeah. That gaze, right, where a lot of like old sort of portraiture type of paintings definitely have this sort of like very mixed emotion, staring individual towards the painter, right? And it's like it could be interpreted as happiness or sadness or just maybe boredom, who knows? But I'm glad that kind of came through at least.
Yeah, and so you just started basically fiddling around. What were you using Photoshop to create that?
Yeah, it's actually, so it's completely made in Photoshop. I think there was a kind of sort of a base template that was kind of modeled after the old like Magic the Gathering cards. So there's that template part, and I kind of mixed and mashed a bunch of different face parts just from random pictures and also the hair, the iconic
Yeah.
hair. And then, yeah, just kind of sort of, if you want to get, detailed, there's a lot of like the warp tool, helps to make the eyes into like of a more, Pepe's eye shape and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you really one thing that's remarkable, and I wanted to bring up is, you were really early in Rare Pepes. I mean, yours is a series, Hair Pepe series 1, card 18. So the other thing that I keep hearing about is that, when Hair Pepe was released, that caused enough traffic on Counterparty that actually um, caused it to seize up a little bit. You want to talk
Yeah,
about
sure. So it's not exactly when it was released, but I think not long after, it went up on the website and people were kind of, at least I wouldn't say trading it, but I was kind of giving it, among my friends. And someone that I know had sent it, but I think at that time, some of the validation in I'm not sure if it was like maybe the counter, one of the wallets at that time might have been like Indie Square or something else. But anyway, one of the clients that my friend was using to make that transaction didn't validate some of the input properly, and it basically made like an invalid or erroneous transaction that was broadcast. And a lot of the nodes that would see this transaction didn't know how to parse it, and it caused some sort of like buffer overflow, I'm assuming. And so those nodes would stop operating, and without the nodes there, then none of the counterparty transactions would get processed. So it kind of apparently brought the network down for I don't know, like a day or two. That was maybe December 2016-ish, I think.
Oh, that's pretty exciting. Yeah, and there's a card that memorializes that too.
Yeah, bad hair day. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a interesting bit of history. When you were so after you created your first Pepe, Hair Pepe, so you said you were just mainly giving it away. I know back then like Pepe Cash and Pepes were.
Oh yeah, just you meet people at the Bitcoin meetup, or I meet up with friends at a bar or whatever, and I'm like, hey, just have one of these, have 10, have 20. I'm just passing them out like candy. And a lot of us, were kind of looking at other Pepes and stuff, so we were kind of just swapping out the ones that we had doubles of and that kind of stuff. And yeah, I mean at that time, it basically had just emotional value. It had no financial, like actual monetary value at the time, and even Pepe Cash was still kind of like very just sort of a meme coin at that time. So yeah, I mean, I don't think it was even during the Hair Pepe or the bad hair day thing, people started to take notice of Hair Pepe, but it's still, at that time, it wasn't even really considered an NFT, right? Like people were not really looking at this as if it was some sort of treasured resource in the sense that people look at NFTs now.
And it's interesting looking back because, and on the scale of collectors and the the impact on modern culture and what I think will be the future demand, the size of the issuances for these assets is so remarkably small. Most of these cards being between 100 and 1,000 issuance. I mean,
Sure.
it's um, it's it's kind of funny to think how many of these have been lost along the way, like you said, because I'm sure you gave some to friends that they lost their wallets and
Oh
or
yeah.
just lost their passphrase or that kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Yeah, it's certainly kind of a different sense of maybe responsibility, or maybe the word is accountability. Like as artists, when we sell or give up, what we're making, we're giving up like control of it in like in ways that you wouldn't have given up control over artwork before. So if you're a painter, a traditional painter, and you give a painting to someone, just in the fact that there's like a physical thing somewhere, and that you probably have some sort of authoritarian sort of level of say over what happens with to your work, even after you've sold it or given it up. For example, like let's say if I'm a famous painter and one of my artwork goes into a gallery or a museum somewhere, and then through some whatever reason I am I don't know, just I need it back or something, or you know, something political happens and I demand that it gets taken down. I think many times, like at least it will be considered, right? Like people would think about it. But now with NFTs, you give up control entirely, right, of what you're selling. So people are free to do with it as they will, and I think that's actually like the super interesting, or part of the chaos maybe. But that's it also comes with, you know. So if you give it up to someone, they're also free to lose it, or they're free to destroy it. They can burn it however they want, and sure you can do that with physical artwork and stuff like that as well. But kind of it's a little bit different, I think, in the NFT world about how that's done.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things that are interesting there. I mean, one is that I guess with NFTs too, is that you, as a lot of the artists, at least retained a few copies for themselves to sell later
Mm-hmm.
of that are still quote unquote original, which is kind of different than how traditional art market would like look at prints or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But the
Mm-hmm.
other thing that's been interesting to see happen over the last year or two is these competing, like, people trying to use like traditional licensing or even newer licensing with NFTs and trying to exert control over it. Where, I mean, I think a lot of that is, you know, to your point, is ultimately going to be futile. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
especially in this Web3 space where, you know, hey, if I want to still do something, even against the artist's wishes, you know, I can create a, you know, an anonymous wallet and transfer it there. And what are you going to do? Try and track down an anonymous wallet on the internet that, you
Yeah.
know, with no footprint? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
good
Mm-hmm.
luck, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's sort of it's just if I imagine, you know, I mean, you know, that there are ways to track things, I guess, to a certain degree, and that's used, you know, a lot in like anti-money laundering and you know the CFT, like the counter-terrorist financing, that kind of world, in Bitcoin, and sure people will probably sleuth, you know, where NFTs are moving at some point. I mean, there is kind of like, you know, in the traditional art market as well, artwork is used as a means to launder money. But yeah, the way that we kind of consider original, and I think now that the chain of custody of artwork through time is recorded, right, in this like immutable ledger, um, not only is the artwork itself, like, you know, now have value, but the sort of the history of whose hands it has passed through is also contributing to that value as well.
Yeah, the provenance is really fascinating because, you know, in the traditional art market, it's a lot of pieces, especially when the further back you go, it gets really murky. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, that you know, you can't cryptographically prove that a piece is actually true. I mean, we've seen numerous scandals where, you know, people are creating you know, duplicates or forgeries or kind of like even in between. Like, what was that painting that was attributed partially to Da Vinci that was sold,
Right.
what was that, like 10 years ago? For, it was at the time the most expensive painting, but you know, it's been that's they refused to show it after kind of like a lot of that controversy surfaced. I mean,
Yeah.
it's interesting. But I mean, how do you feel as an artist who's created, again, I consider it one of the most important Pepes in the entire collection, but not just as a Pepe, but I mean, Pepes themselves being what I also regard as one of the most important moments in NFT and crypto history.
How do I feel about like this
Yeah.
the concept of authenticity, or
Well, how do you feel about your, like your contribution to that movement and
I
that
see.
that moment?
Yeah, well, it was certainly was it's unintentional, I guess, in a sense that, you know, I never expected it to blow up in the way that it has. Um, I like that, you know, that I like that I've been able to make something that was just really absurd, and that the comments that I usually hear from people are, you know, like they tell me about the first time that they ever saw HAIRPEPE and it gave them a good laugh or something like that. And I think that's kind of like what really makes me the most happy, I guess, more than anything else. Um, I've, you know, been lucky enough to have kept a few of them. So, you know, I've been able to sell them at a decent price now. And that's, you know, helped to let's say, pay off my student loan debts from way back when. So finally, my art degree has made it ROI. But yeah, no, I think just like the interesting part is just kind of connecting with the other artists and seeing how all of this NFT work is really kind of calling into question a lot of the sort of concepts about art that that I had been so interested in before.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, and like we were just discussing too, the provenance and the chain of custody for a lot of these,
Mhm.
a lot of your individual hair pepes, I'm sure would be truly fascinating, especially in the early days. Have you had hair pepe put in any museums or shows? Have you been approached for
Um,
that?
yeah, I mean, it's definitely shown in a couple galleries in Decentraland. I think some people have coordinated a couple Pepe galleries there. Also in last year's the NFT NYC event, there was a vintage rares gallery, and so like a very beautifully produced physical version of HAIRPEPE was shown in the gallery there, and God, it was like in this beautiful gold frame, like it just like the elegance and like gorgeousness of it was again like kind of really compounded the absurdity of it. But yeah, so it showed there, and it went up for auction, and I do believe that it's going to be in a, I should say, like a textbook, an art book, but I can't say which one, but it will be featured in a book about NFTs coming sometime in the future.
Oh, that's exciting. Did
Yeah,
an NFT go along with the physical at that sale?
yes, it did. Yeah,
Oh, cool.
yeah. I mean, I think it's again like the sort of like sense of what is ownership or what is authentic, and that really is like, those concepts that we've thought about before of what that means is really strained by NFTs now. And so it feels right to put like a physical thing, the physical representation and the actual counterparty asset together as a set. But I also understand, like, the artwork can and then sometimes does extend beyond like just like the NFT part. So I understand that some artists, are producing artwork, physical versions of that don't tie together. That's kind of more like a spin-off, and that's totally fine and good. I just like that, all of these kind of concepts of like what is the original is really challenged, and until I think a lot of NF like hardcore or diehard NFTers like to say, well, like the actual asset is really just the data that's saved in the blockchain itself. And sure, we can choose to believe that, but it doesn't really mean much until the critical mass of people all agree with us. And even then you're saying, okay, so in the case of counterparty, the actual image itself is not stored in the blockchain. It's just kind of like a pointer, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a very early version of what NFT is. So it's not actually like put in my IPFS or anything like that. So there's still a lot of questions that remain. And even if you do, start using things like IPFS and have like the artwork itself actually distributed and stored somewhere else, we still have all these things like, so what are we actually ownership of, and does the artwork extend beyond that into like representations of it in magazines and whatnot?
Yeah, that's really fascinating. One thing I forgot to ask too is, did you save your original like Adobe project for Hair Pepe? Is that something?
Yes, I did. I still have it. Yep.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's really, really important going forward too, like you said, because counterparty, that can be updated after the fact.
Yes.
And I've seen a couple tokens where whoever owns the token has updated it to something completely different
Oh
now.
yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah, I think like that sort of like dynamic or like evolving NFTs are super interesting. I'd like to do something more in that area as well in the future. But having like you said, like having the Photoshop file has been like very I don't useful, I guess. I think so HAIRPEPE has this. Are you familiar with like the salon?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. So in the salon, like this is kind of, I would say the number one evangelist of HAIRPEPE. His name is Sean. He was thinking of putting together like a billboard at some point. And so he asked me like, oh, can I get the original PSD, or like, can you use it to make like a large version, a large scale version? So we had kind of like toyed with that idea a little bit, but yeah, it's handy having that because I can make other stuff with it for sure.
Oh, that's awesome. I even saw someone, I think it was Sean, had a set of custom sneakers made with the Hair Pepe
Yeah,
image on it too.
yeah. I think he had I think some, I think they were Vans maybe, or maybe some Chucks. I can't remember which one it was, but yeah, those are really nice looking. I definitely hope like I don't know people. I encourage people to go ahead and like please make stuff with Pepe on it. Like it's not really owned by me anymore. It's now kind of like out in the world. So if people want to make stuff with it, like, please go ahead.
It's interesting that you have that attitude because I've talked um, to other artists in different projects and whatnot, and they try and maintain kind of the at least an element of control over their work. But I mean,
Hmm.
kind of what I think is fascinating too is we have this, with NFTs, it's really like this collision of, you know, yeah, we have old government like copyright systems and all of that stuff, and you
Hmm.
can try and I mean, I think you can try and hold on to that. But I
Hmm.
mean, ultimately, like you, I think it's probably better to or easier to just let go of that control because at least in the broader crypto space, I think is ultimately going to be unenforceable anyway. And
Right.
I think the more copies and different representations you have, as long as your attribution is still there, which is there because of the recording of the original project, I think it
Hmm.
actually reinforces and makes it even more important and valuable.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I definitely I can see why. If you've been a digital artist for for some time before NFTs became a thing, my finding ways to like successfully monetize your work in at the scale of like other artists who have more traditional mediums, it's probably been very hard. Maybe you have digital prints of your work selling, or you have it up in gallery shows, or you uh, might have some other sort of way of monetizing it, but it's not like at the level of grandeur, I guess, that you have like with other traditional art mediums. So wanting to like hold on to that ability of control now that digital art can have like such high value, which I am not sure how much of that is just kind of novelty at the moment, because I feel like NFTs at the moment are probably are coming with a bit of a novelty premium. But now that it can be potentially way more profitable to sell your digital art as an NFT. I totally understand that desire for control, and I hope that a lot of other artists have been able to, find a way to make a living and really find stability in their work now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to denigrate their effort to make money. I just think it like to actually try and enforce it would be very
For
hard
sure.
long
Yeah. I mean,
term.
I've basically given up, and that's why I'm now kind of just on the opposite side. Like, do what you will with it. It's out there now.
Did you try for a little bit?
Um, Not really. I mean, I think, as soon as you start seeing people make derivative work with it, so that, I mean, that bad hair day is probably the first example, right, of someone making something based off of hair pepe. Um, I was, if anything, just flattered. And I thought, well, it kind of crosses your mind, right? Like, well, why shouldn't I have a slice of the profits? Like it's hard not to have that in your mind, but at the same time, it's like, well, we're all making this kind of just the spirit of the project is really not about money at all. Especially, well, I mean, that is not the case for every NFT project, I think, but I think for Pepes especially, it's really been just about having fun, making silly stuff, and seeing where it goes. So I decided to adopt that spirit in its entirety, and that's where I am now.
Well, that's fun. Yeah, it's been fun. Like, there's even fake rares that have kind of memed on Hair Pepe too.
Yeah.
Um, it'll be interesting to see, to see how, all the different iterations that'll come in the future. So
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
is fun. So after you had your success with Hair Pepe, and you had been like trading it and giving it away, and so what made you decide to, or inspired you to make your next Pepe, the Breathe Pepe?
Yeah. I think Breathed Pepe I made not too long after I made Hair Pepe. I don't know, I can't remember the exact timing, but it wouldn't have been like any more than like a couple months gap. And I was thinking, about art, I guess, or like the context of what Hair Pepe was in the art world. So I kind of went back to my roots a bit and thought about art history, and kind of went back to like the different old representations of the Virgin Mary with babe in arms, and so I kind of made a play off of that and submitted it. And again, it just kind of didn't quite have the effect of Hair Pepe, I think, but people who knew what I was referring to, who did get it, at least I got some messages from them, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I know
Yeah,
that."
I really love the fact you use the Wojak for the baby too. That's
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think that was that. I mean, that is my only second and last Rare Pepe that I've made. But yeah, I think once people uh, started to get into Rare Pepes again in the past couple of years, I think that one also kind of got a little bit of attention. But there's way better. I mean, like, oh god, I can't remember the exact name of the individual, but she's actually like a very talented like traditional painter, and she's been making these beautiful like oil
oh,
paintings. Yeah.
Tasha, I think, is that it?
Yes. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's it. Yeah. I mean, and her work also like just really heavily references very famous notorious sort of portraiture and other kinds of paintings in the past. So I think hers is probably a way better example. But there are, quite a few other Pepes that have this sort of art history background, and it's yeah, a lovely thing to see.
Yeah, I love the fact that your skill as an artist really went into this. Again, this is Breathe Pepe looks great, and there's a little bit of a animation to it as well. I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah, right. That was kind of an experiment too. I think I kind of wanted to make it look very shiny, and I didn't quite really nail it because I was kind of just my first time working with sort of like making a sort of shiny looking GIF or GIF, however you want to pronounce it. But yeah, I don't think there were very many other animated Pepes yet at that time.
Yeah, we really saw that take off later on in the series, and like you said,
Hmm.
this was still really early on. It was still a 2016 card.
Yeah.
Um, so when you released Breathe Pepe, did you continue to like trade and sell, and were you still active after you released Breathe Pepe, or did you kind of take a step back and focus more on your work, or how did
Yeah,
you?
I think that for a while, sort of people were making it's just I would say like the Cambrian explosion of Pepe artwork just kind of occurred, and people were making all kinds of art. The series is like they just expanded by so many. I mean, even now, I look at Pepe Wallet, and I find work that I still haven't seen before. So a lot of that explosion, I was still kind of looking into the different artworks, and I had friends also who were artists as well. So we were kind of trading amongst each other, but I didn't really take it like to the level of trading for profit. It was more just to kind of like establish a collection of things that I liked. But around maybe 2017 or so, towards the end of the year, I got very busy with my other work, um, and also had a couple other sort of RT projects as well. So I stepped back from Pepe's at that time, and I still, maintained my wallet and kind of, you know, did some stuff here and there. But when it kind of really came back again in the past, I would say year and a half, um, I've been building my collection again.
Oh, that's fun. So have you been focused on the on rare pepes, or have you been dabbling in the fake rares as well?
Yeah, I mean, I love a lot of the fake rare stuff. I've been working on something else. So I haven't really focused too much on it. And I do have maybe a couple submissions that I have in mind for fake rares. But I haven't, none of my work is on there, but I do collect them for sure.
Yeah, it's some artists, a couple of the OG artists um don't like fake rares, but I think they're really fun. And I think it's like the spirit is right on with the
Hmm.
um and with the fake commons too. I think it's a great continuation. It's cool to see. One thing, like you're saying, I'll every now and then I see Pepe's in the OG set that I hadn't seen before, that, you're like, oh, wow, that's amazing. And it's the same thing with the fakers. Now there's so much variety and diversity. They're creating some really great
Hmm.
stuff.
Yeah, I'm just really happy to see like the same sort of the original spirit of it still continuing. Like I probably would have also worried a little bit about, okay, this is probably a big money grab, just because of the timing. You know, NFTs have had really peaked around the time that fake rares came out. So I think that's a valid concern, but I think a lot of the people who have submitted their artwork and have been part of the community have still have that same spirit. So I think that's a very valuable part.
I know when I was looking at fake rares early on, the moment when I knew that it was like the project was going to have some legs is, because a lot of the early cards were just straight up plays on OG Rare
Yeah.
Pepes. But
Hmm.
when I saw Bloomer by AB, that let me know that, I mean, the project was had serious art going on it, and
Yeah.
they were still going to produce some original, like some serious original work too. That was a phenomenal submission.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, there's continues to be other really great stuff too. So
Yeah. Yeah, no, and it's happy to see. Like it's cool to see a lot of the original artists, also coming back, and you wouldn't have seen from or heard from them in all these years, and that they have new work coming out. So that's absolutely stellar.
yeah, that's fun. So well, I hope to see some submissions from you in the Faker directory in the future. That'd be fun.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Yeah. So would you like to talk about any other, have you been involved in any other art projects that you'd like to speak about?
Yeah, I mean, so I mentioned before, like, I'm very interested in like the absurdity or chaotic parts of crypto. I've always felt like the the problems created by it are way more interesting than what the problems that are being solved by blockchain. So I kind of try and strive to work on anything that's kind of strange or bizarre or useless, and I take a lot of inspiration also from it's like this famous a Japanese artist Kenji Kawakami. He made you may have heard this word like chindogu, or maybe more Americanized might be like just chindogu, but it's a concept of like these useless and absurd objects, and I think that it had kind of spread around pictures of them had spread around as like as memes, like maybe in the early 2000s on the internet. But an example would have been like, let's say, if you fall asleep on the train and you don't want to like lean onto the person next to you, you wear this little helmet, and the helmet has like a plunger that attaches to the window behind you, so that your head always stays up in an upright and straight position, so you're not leaning on those around you. And it's meant to be like this kind of absurdist thing, but then it also has a little bit of utility if you think about it really carefully, it's technically right, but it's just so like bizarre and inconvenient that no one would ever use it. So a couple of things that I had made was, for example, um, this is through a previous company that I worked with. They had a kind of a little lab project going on, but I made this like it's just a very simple web page where you can send your Bitcoin to it, and then it sends what you sent right back to you. But when you do that, like a little animation happens where like you see this transaction um, kind of flowing into the screen, and then it bounces off this giant spring, and then like it goes back, and that's it. Like that's all it does. But just like little silly little toys like that is kind of stuff that I like to make. I think I maybe touched a little bit about the physicality of experience before, like in hardware wallets, but I've worked on some physical Bitcoins in the past as well. One is like Satori Coin, and it looks very much like an orange poker chip, I guess, and it has that same concept as the Cassatius coin. So there's a little peelable sticker on the back with a QR code to redeem the value inside. But nonetheless, I focused a lot on the design of that, on the front and back, and and the actual the coin itself. And I really enjoyed, seeing people holding it in their hand and saying, well, is this Bitcoin? And then you're like, well, yes and no. Like there's kind of like this sort of, technically, I guess it kind of is, because like the QR code's in there, but that's not really what the Bitcoin is. So, just sort of like that's the philosophical questions that people ask intuitively when they hold it in their own hands is like very enjoyable. So, you know, stuff like that has been, what I've been working on. I hope to do some more NFT related work soon. And where I work now, actually, my day job is also very NFT centric. So that's basically all I do all day.
Oh wow, that's exciting that you have such an exposure to that day to day. Did you keep any of your Satori coins too?
So yeah, I have like maybe two left. And so the people who I partnered with for the manufacturing and stuff, they probably have maybe a few rolls as well. But I really like, again, at those old Bitcoin meetups and stuff, or to introduce people to Bitcoin, that experience was just so valuable. So I was giving them out to like everyone. And unfortunately, like, they all had a serial number.
Huh.
And I had number 3, and I meant to give out a much later version to someone else, but I kind of got them mixed up in my pocket while I was probably a little bit drunk at some party. And so someone out there has number 3. It's probably highly valuable now, but yeah, I only have a couple left.
Well, that's cool. You still have at least one though.
Hmm.
I know I would imagine just like the Cassius coins that those are super collectible. I mean, I know I've
Yeah.
always wanted to have a Cassius coin too.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I think that the cool thing about the Cassatius coins is like they they did theirs in metal. I think it's brass, or maybe some brass mix. And it was made in various different runs. And so,
Mhm.
like the traditional coin collectors world, there are, these like mistake prints where, some of the stippling on the edge is off centered, or like there's a typo and that kind of stuff. So that exists also in the other sort of physical Bitcoins as well. And it's interesting to see like this sort of very traditional coin collectors type of like um I don't know, phenomenon like occurring in like such something so new and modern as Bitcoin as well.
Yeah, I know the Cassatius coins. They had different denominations. When you were issuing the Satori coins, did those have different denominations as well?
We very purposely made it one denomination, and at that time very very low. So it's 0.001 Bitcoin, and at that time when it was made, I think that would have been maybe what, like 3 or 5 cents worth. Um, and the thinking behind that was that since Bitcoin is such a, like, I don't know, foreign thing for most people, um, and it seems scary. People, have heard a lot of scams from, in the news, or maybe their friend, made some poor investment somewhere. And so to make people feel like the hurdle is low, and that they don't have to really have too much skin into the game for their first experience, I wanted to make it a very very low value coin. So it's just 0.001, and if you lose it, you don't feel bad. If we had a little gacha machine in Akihabara where we were distributing them as well. And if we were trying to scam you out of whatever, however much yen, and so you put your coin in, like, you wouldn't feel too bad about it. Whereas if you're setting up for an exchange, not only are you risking your own money through a bank transfer to maybe a service that you don't quite trust yet, but you're also giving them a whole bunch of personal information. So the idea was to make it low value, really easy. You can get out of a little practically a vending machine, and if you lose it, it won't hurt you.
Well, that's really a cool concept. Yeah, keeping it low enough to where it's not intimidating. And like you said, the
Hmm.
pain threshold, if you screw up, it's not going to hurt you financially.
Yeah, yeah, and still, and if things go well, you're walking away with at least the experience of having redeemed Bitcoin, or hopefully even using it, or doing something with it afterwards. And if you didn't redeem it or do anything with it, then at least hopefully it will have gone up in value since you originally bought it. So, yeah,
That's a really neat concept.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think.
So,
Oh, go ahead.
oh no, go ahead.
So yeah, I think like that kind of goes along with making sure that the experience of these things is like very is a low barrier to entry. And so the thing that I worry a little bit about NFTs now is that because of how expensive the more famous ones have become, it kind of feels out of reach for some people, I think. Or when you hear if you say like, oh, I work in NFTs, people assume that you're rich or something, and that's not the case. So I hope that we can continue to find projects that are really just more fun based, or things that are really just meant for the spirit or the art of it, and not really too much focused on monetary value.
Yeah, I think that's part of what we're going to, we've entered a kind of a bear market right now with NFTs, and I'm
Hmm.
hoping that kind of chills out some of the, um, the crazy excess speculation that we've seen where, there's just been, at least for the last year and a half or so, like there's just these groups that can just basically create, um, just really low tier effort stuff and just
Mm.
crank it out and create a bunch
Yeah.
of hype and make a ton of money. And I don't know. Again, I'd rather see people there are people that are pushing the boundaries, creating like new forms of art, new interesting ideas in the NFT
Hmm.
space. So it's not all scams, but there's just a lot of froth, like you said. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, but I'll be honest, like I'm not really super into the projects where it's just kind of like you have parameters of different facial parts and that they get generated at random in different permutations, and so you've got like different animal faces. I'm not a fan of the those series very much, but at the same time, like again in the art world, that sort of sense of okay, if the art is easily reproducible, like what is its value or what is authenticity? That's been a question in the art world for a long time, and it is like an interesting, or it can be in itself like a statement as NFTs as well.
I feel I'm similar. Like I picked up the reason I have a CryptoPunk is last year when I was like just starting to learn about NFTs, I was ignorant and I thought that CryptoPunks at the time, and that's what the message was, is that they were the first NFT. So
Hmm.
that's why I took the splash and bought my
Hmm.
CryptoPunk. I like the
Hmm.
I like the one that I got too, but yeah, I mean it's I I don't even pay attention to the new issuances of
Hmm.
NFTs. I'm really focused on the vintage space because I'm really excited about to me the like the moment that these NFTs and these collections are capturing too in the development of crypto. I'm
Hmm.
also passionate too about what really crypto can what the benefits it can bring to society at large. We're in a I mean, the way I look at it, we're in a really crucial time right now where I think it's important that we create more adoption, as much adoption as possible, before central banks and governments can um, force central bank digital currencies down our throats. And the more
Hmm.
adoption we have for crypto, the harder it will be for them to justify trying to put owners crackdowns and try and regulate it into obscurity. So
Hmm. Yeah, no, I agree, and I think like even if the end game, yeah, so to speak, of all this doesn't result in, like, let's say, I think that's kind of this cryptopian vision of, okay, Bitcoin world currency. Even if we never get to that, or if it somehow disappears at some point in time, I think a lot of the things that we've learned about how we think about money and how we think about security as well, all kinds of things. Like a lot of the like I said, the problems that have been created by this, and like the kind of interesting questions, that in itself is like, I think, very valuable to society. And I hope that um, we can continue to grow, at least from this, in whatever direction that may be.
Yeah, it definitely has been a learning experience for for society and world at large to see, like you said, not just what crypto solves, but also what interesting problems it creates too.
Hmm.
I mean, it's interesting. One of the things, initially the idea was that Bitcoin was going to be anonymous, but it ended up not being
Sure.
quite as anonymous as intended. So,
Hmm.
that's a long-term consequence that we have to kind of deal with.
Yeah,
Uh,
and that's true for, I think, I mean, especially in this age, like, that we have the internet age. So, anything that you say online, you might as well assume that it's archived in somewhere by someone. And so that kind of new concern that we have with the sort of advent of social media and whatnot is also creeping into money as well. So definitely, as a PSA out there. So I used to do work a little bit in Bitcoin transaction analysis, and
oh,
please be careful of how you handle your wallets. Please assume that people know who you are, and it's a way to be. There is a way to be very close to anonymous, but it's very takes a lot of steps in many cases. There's a lot of interesting software out there that helps make it easier, but please assume that this record is as advertised is there forever.
yeah, that's the approach I've taken, is that unless you've gone out of your way, like at step one, to keep everything 100% anonymous, then you're gonna just assume that that's you can trace it
Hmm.
back to you pretty easily. Yeah, the chain analysis software is fascinating. I think it's interesting how governments and banks have tried to slander crypto for money laundering, when the vast majority of it is actually just conducted through normal fiat and the banks
Hmm.
themselves. So you
Yeah.
know, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Like you said, I would hope that we can create enough adoption to where at least crypto doesn't go away, even if it's maybe minimized a little bit. But
Hmm.
I would hope that the lessons that at least the community, the crypto community, learns helps prevent some of the more darker scenarios that could be in our
Hmm.
monetary future with
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
central bank digital currencies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there so you work, like you said, you're working in NFTs kind of in your day job. Is there anything that you're like, any trends or anything that you're looking like you're following or that you're excited about?
Yeah.
Any developments?
Hmm. um I think what I'm really focused on at the moment is really usability and a sort of responsible maintenance of someone's your own NFT collection. So I think some of the things that I spend thinking about, or the time that I spend thinking at work, is really focused on, for example, as if you're, let's say, at a marketplace, or if you're a wallet provider, or if you're a content creator, how much should you curate, right? And so if you're a newcomer to the NFT space and you open up OpenSea for the first time, there's a lot of beautiful work and a lot of interesting stuff there, but there's also a lot of trash. And so this kind of like, well, how much as service providers are we responsible for helping people ease into projects or collections that uh, are either, let's say, artistically meaningful, or let's say that we can vouch or have done some due diligence to prove that there's not going to be a rug pull at some point, or that the work is actually original and not a copy of something. And so there's definitely a lot of things that can be done in all different sort of platforms. So like on the marketplace side, on the wallet side, on the viewer side, that can be done to help to help ease in newcomers. And I think I really would want to avoid a future where people look or when they hear the word NFT, they'll say, "Oh yeah, that old fad. What a waste of time, and it was just full of scams." Like I don't want that to happen. So I think there's sort of gonna have to be at some point a sense of curation somewhere. And I think a lot of existing platforms like I feel like Super Rare or maybe Rareable are also trying to curate in some degree. But I think it can be done in other ways as well. So I'm kind of it's a question in my mind.
Yeah, that's definitely a need, like you said, both on the wallet side and on the platform side. We have one of the problems we have is spam NFTs being sent people. We had last
Mm-hmm.
year, they even developed the ability to basically utilize some weaknesses in the contracts and marketplaces where
Sure.
you could even interact with a NFT be malicious. But one thing that I've myself and some of the other people in the historic community have been asking for is a minimal level of curation in the marketplaces like OpenSea and
Mm-hmm.
Looks Rare, to have just a dedicated, curated historic section,
Mm-hmm.
because again, for what I'm interested in is the historically significant stuff. You know, it. I would really hate to see new people coming into the space like get hoodwinked, because there's in these marketplaces, it's really easy to create these lookalike collections that are,
Sure.
you know, and like you said, the number of the number of new projects that are being created every day is enormous. So
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how do you help someone like navigate that? I mean, it's just an enormous
Yeah.
amount of content, right?
It's just like there's just so much, and you can kind of go on the opposite end of the spectrum too. So I mean, curation gone evil is just censorship, right? So if you go in that direction, then you're not helping anyone either. If you go too hard on curation as well, it kind of just becomes, let's say, very like controlled by maybe corporations or large social media networks. The last thing that you would want is just to have like this echo chamber of the same stuff all the time. So it should be well balanced, but who am I to just to determine where that balance should be? So just some thoughts that I've been mulling over at the moment, and thinking about how that can manifest into perhaps like a wallet UI or a marketplace in some way.
Yeah, another thing that I was thinking about recently is that you know, another user experience problem that we have is, in the Ethereum NFT space, a lot of communities, they use things like Collabland or whatever to authenticate and provide membership benefits.
Mm-hmm.
But I've stopped even utilizing those, because currently with even with hardware wallets, it can be impossible to really tell what you're signing with these
Mm-hmm.
transactions. So
Yeah.
I mean, especially if you have a valuable collection, the risk for signing anything you don't absolutely know what it is enormous. So
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to see some more maturity in that, in the management of your collection slash that interaction as well. I don't know. That's,
Mm-hmm.
again, this is still early days, and like you, I would, I not just hope, but I do think that that NFTs aren't a fad. I do think a lot of the stuff that has been created in the last year and a half is going to go straight to zero and won't bounce back. But
Mm-hmm.
but I'm really passionate, and I do believe, though, that at least the significant historic NFTs are, I think they're going to be, some of the most coveted digital assets, in the world. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and again, not, and I'm more interested for the historic significance, but I do think that there will be a large monetary value associated with them too, because of
Mm-hmm.
what I see as a upcoming demand too. But I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just so, I wish I could crystal ball, what the future will hold for the art world, because um, how this will be I guess, regarded in the future is it's just such a up in the air thing. But I mean, like I said, there are definitely museums and like art textbooks and whatnot that are interested in following NFTs now, and there are even very large auction houses, Sotheby's, and so on, who are now looking into it and legitimizing it by simply mentioning it. So I think it'll be here for to stay, but I just kind of we may call it something else. When Rare Pepes became a thing, I don't think everyone was really using the word NFT yet at that time. So we may have a new word for it, but it might be essentially the same thing.
Yeah, there may be a a better term or a different representation, but yeah, I think it's here to stay. Yeah, and like you said, I would just hope that we keep the scams and the scammers to a minimum, to again, to make sure it's a healthy space for
Yeah,
people as best we can.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Ooh, not in particular. I'm just very thankful and happy to chat with you, and super happy to hear that there's all this interest in Pepes. I think we've mentioned it multiple times in our chat today already, but like there's something just very unique about Rare Pepe compared to other NFT projects, and I really hope that it continues either through things like fake rares or other stuff. But yeah.
Yeah, I guess I just say a kind of a shout out for people who are listening to this. If you want to participate in a modern project with a similar ethos, you can create your own art and submit it to the fake rare directory or fake commons, and you can have your own card published. So it's an exciting opportunity, I think.
Mhm.
Well, cool. Well, it's been really fun talking to you today. A lot of interesting stuff to think about.
Yes, thank you.